The bustling spaceport was alive with activity, a never-ending flow of ships coming and going, each one more unique than the last. Strange sounds echoed through the air, blending with the hum of the ship's engines as they prepared for departure. Lights blinked in every direction, casting long shadows that danced across the metal floors. In the middle of all this chaos, an alien officer walked with purpose, her sharp eyes scanning every corner of the crowded terminal. She was tall, standing out among the crowd of travelers, her sleek uniform and high-tech armor adding to her imposing presence. Her green skin shimmered under the artificial lights, her pointed ears flicking slightly as she focused on every movement around her. Her duty was simple: maintain order, keep the peace, and ensure that no one was hiding anything dangerous. Today, however, something felt different. There was an energy in the air that she couldn't place, an odd tension that made her senses heighten. The officer couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew something was wrong. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a gnawing feeling that someone in the crowd was hiding something. The terminal was crowded, but her instincts told her to focus on a single figure. A tall, hooded figure walked through the terminal, moving strangely among the crowd. Unlike the others, this person wasn't in a hurry, wasn't rushing to catch a ship. Instead, they walked slowly, purposefully, their body tense, as though they were aware of being watched. The officer's sharp eyes followed the figure as they passed by, their steps quiet but calculated. She noticed something unusual. A bulge, small but noticeable, was hidden beneath the figure's cloak. The officer's mind immediately went to all the possible dangers: weapons, explosives, or something. Even worse, this could be an attempt to smuggle something dangerous past security. She knew she couldn't let them pass. Without thinking twice, she moved swiftly, her boots tapping softly against the metal floor as she closed the distance between them. The figure didn't notice her at first, but she was getting closer now, and she could almost hear the soft rustle of the cloak as it shifted. "Stop," she commanded, her voice sharp and commanding. It echoed through the terminal, cutting through the noise of the busy spaceport. "I need to speak with you." The figure froze but didn't turn around. They stood perfectly still for a moment, almost as though deciding what to do. The officer took a step closer, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of the energy baton at her side. She wasn't planning on using it yet, but she wanted the figure to know that she was prepared for anything. The figure slowly turned, their face still hidden beneath the hood, but the officer could see the sharp eyes that peeked out from underneath. For a brief moment, there was a flash of something: fear, determination. The officer couldn't be sure, but she was certain of one thing: the person standing in front of her was hiding something. "I said stop," the officer repeated, her voice a little firmer now. "Show me what you're carrying." The figure hesitated, and for a split second, the officer thought they might try to run. But then, as if making a decision, they slowly pulled back the edge of their cloak, revealing what was hidden underneath. It wasn't what she expected. Instead of a weapon or a bomb, the officer was faced with an oddly shaped, small creature, blue and fluffy, its large eyes blinking up at her in confusion. The creature seemed harmless enough, but its unusual appearance was enough to make the officer pause. Its fur was soft, almost iridescent, and it stared at her with big, unblinking eyes that seemed far too intelligent for its size. The officer blinked in surprise, unsure of what to make of this discovery. She had never seen anything quite like it before. It didn't look dangerous, but something about it felt important. Why was this strange creature being hidden? "Is this yours?" she asked, her voice softer now as she took a step closer, her suspicions still present, but now mixed with curiosity. The figure, still keeping their face hidden, nodded slowly but didn't speak. The officer could see the tension in their posture, the way their hands tightly clutched the creature, almost as though they were afraid to let it go. "I need to inspect this creature," she said, her tone firm once more. "It's against the regulations to hide creatures like this without proper documentation." "Where did you get it?" The figure's hands tightened around the creature, and the officer noticed a subtle flicker of fear in their eyes. Something wasn't right, and she could sense that the figure was hiding more than just the creature. Before the officer could press further, a loud noise echoed from the far side of the terminal. Another ship was arriving, and the sound of its Engines drowned out the rest of the conversation. The officer's attention was briefly distracted, but the figure seized the opportunity. In an instant, the hooded individual turned, moving quickly, pushing past the officer and disappearing into the crowd. The officer cursed under her breath and immediately gave chase, her boots pounding against the metal floor as she followed them. She pushed through the throngs of people, her focus solely on the mysterious figure. They were fast, but the officer was faster. She weaved through the crowd, her eyes never leaving her target. But every time she thought she was getting closer, the figure slipped further ahead. As they neared the exit, the officer's hand reached out to grab the figure. But just as she was about to make contact, the figure turned, disappearing into the shadows. The officer stopped, panting, frustration creeping into her chest. She looked around, but the figure was gone, and so was the strange creature. What had just happened? She didn't know, but she knew this was far from over. Something was hidden here, and she was going to find out what it was. The feeling of mystery lingered in the air, and the officer couldn't shake the nagging thought that she had just uncovered a small piece of something much larger and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The officer's breath came in shallow bursts as she scanned the bustling terminal, her sharp eyes sweeping over every face in the crowd. The figure had vanished, slipping into the sea of travelers with the grace of a ghost, leaving nothing but the lingering sense of unease behind. She had lost him, the strange creature, the bulge beneath the cloak. Everything had slipped through her fingers. But something about the encounter didn't sit right. Her instinct screamed at her that this wasn't just a simple case of smuggling. She looked down at her empty hands, still feeling the weight of the strange encounter. The creature had been harmless, but the way the figure had protected it, almost as though it was more valuable than anything else, kept nagging at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just slipped through her grasp. She wasn't going to let it go that easily, not after everything she had witnessed in her career. The officer turned toward the nearest security station, her face hardening with determination. The control center was a hub of constant activity, filled with technicians and officers monitoring every inch of the terminal. She needed information. Whatever that figure was hiding, she had to uncover it before it slipped even further into the shadows. A few moments later, she was at the security desk, speaking with an operator who was quick to access the terminal's surveillance system. The room was dim, only lit by the glow of monitors, casting an eerie green light across the operator's face. The officer leaned over the counter, her gaze intense. "I need footage from Sector 6, 10 minutes ago." A hooded figure, tall, moving suspiciously. The operator quickly typed a few commands, bringing up the live feed of the terminal. The officer's sharp eyes darted between the screen and the terminal's layout as the footage began to play. She watched as the figure moved through the crowd, almost blending in with the throngs of travelers. There was nothing particularly unusual about their gait or movements, but it was the way they carried themselves, tense, cautious, like someone who didn't belong. But then, as the figure walked past a glowing advertisement, the camera zoomed in on the bulge beneath their cloak. The officer froze. It was clear now there was something hidden, something the figure didn't want anyone to see. The officer leaned in closer, her breath steadying as she studied the footage, hoping to catch some clue that would unravel the mystery. Just as she thought she was getting closer, the footage flickered and the screen went black. The officer's stomach dropped. What happened? Why did it cut off? The operator frantically tapped the controls, his face a picture of frustration. "It's not just this camera. There's a glitch in the system. Something is tampering with the footage. It's been happening on and off for the last few hours." The officer's heart skipped a beat. The glitch wasn't just a random error. Someone was trying to hide something, someone with enough influence to tamper with the station's security systems. She didn't need to be told twice. She was being led deeper into something much larger than a routine patrol. Turning sharply, the officer left the control room, her mind racing. She needed to follow the trail wherever it led. The encounter with the hooded figure had felt like the beginning of something. But what? The figure had been carrying something valuable. That much was clear. But what was it? And why had it been hidden so carefully? She made her way back to the terminal floor, her mind whirling as she analyzed the situation. Her eyes scanned the crowd, trying to pick out anyone acting out of the ordinary. But the terminal was as busy as ever, with people moving in every direction. She couldn't see the figure anywhere, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe she was chasing a ghost. Maybe the whole thing had been a simple misunderstanding. But then she saw it. At the far end of the terminal, near the transport hub, a door that was usually locked stood ajar. The officer's instincts flared. She had passed it earlier, and it had been securely closed. But now it was open just wide enough for someone to slip through unnoticed. She moved swiftly toward the door, her eyes darting back and forth to ensure she wasn't being followed. As she approached, she could hear faint sounds coming from the other side, a low murmur, almost like voices. The officer paused, her hand resting lightly on her baton, ready for whatever lay beyond. With a quick glance over her shoulder, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, with only a few low-hanging lights casting shadows across the space. At first, the officer saw nothing but an empty storage room filled with crates and equipment. But then she heard a faint scratching noise. It was coming from one of the larger crates near the back of the room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached slowly, each step deliberate and cautious. She reached the crate and paused. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. With a sudden movement, the officer flung the crate open, only to be met with the sight of the creature, the same one that had been hidden beneath the hooded figure's cloak. But there was something different now. The creature's fur was matted, and its eyes were wide, as if it had been trapped for far too long. It looked at the officer, its large eyes full of fear and confusion. But there was something else in them, something urgent, as though it was trying to communicate something important. The officer leaned down, her fingers gently brushing against the creature's soft fur. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the creature's eyes seemed to settle, its body relaxing in the officer's grip. It was calm now, but the officer couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just an ordinary creature. It was something far more important, something tied to a mystery much bigger than she had anticipated. Just as she was about to stand up, the door behind her slammed shut. A shadow loomed at the entrance, and the officer's pulse quickened. She wasn't alone. Someone had followed her into the room. The officer's grip tightened on her baton, ready for whatever was coming next. She wasn't going down without answers. The figure had led her here, and she wasn't about to let them slip away. Not now, not when she was so close to the truth. In the silence that followed, she heard a voice, a low, cold voice that sent a chill down her spine. You should have stayed out of this. The silence in the room was suffocating. The officer stood frozen, the soft glow from the flickering lights casting sharp shadows across her face. As she turned slowly toward the voice, she didn't need to look twice to know that she was no longer alone in this dark, forgotten corner of the spaceport. The sound of boots dragging against the floor echoed softly in the distance, and the faint scent of metal and something unfamiliar filled the air. Her grip tightened on her baton, ready for whatever came next. The figure standing in the doorway was barely visible in the shadows, but the officer could make out the distinct silhouette of someone cloaked and tall. There was something about their presence and air of danger, like a predator closing in on its prey. The officer's instinct screamed at her to be cautious. This wasn't a simple smuggling operation anymore. She had uncovered something much bigger, something dark and treacherous. She raised her chin slightly, her voice calm but full of authority. Who are you? The words seemed to hang in the air, thick with tension, as if the very room was waiting for the answer. The figure stepped forward, their face still obscured by a hood. But the officer could now make out the details of their body, tall, muscular, and covered in armor that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Their movements were deliberate, calculated. This was no ordinary smuggler. Whoever they were far more dangerous than the officer had expected. A low, amused chuckle escaped the figure's lips, sending a shiver down the officer's spine. Does it matter? The voice was low, silky, and laced with an unmistakable arrogance. You should have stayed out of this. Now you've found yourself tangled in something you can't possibly understand. The officer's mind raced. Tangled in what? What's going on here? What is that thing? She motioned toward the creature, still cowering in the crate, its eyes wide and anxious, as though it understood that something important was unfolding. The figure's eyes flickered toward the creature, then back at the officer. "That thing," they said, their tone growing colder, "is far more valuable than you can imagine. You shouldn't have interfered. Now you're in the middle of a much larger game." The officer's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process the cryptic words. She had thought she was simply investigating a routine smuggling case, but now she realized she had stumbled upon something far darker. The creature, what was it? Why was it so important? And who was this figure, lurking in the shadows, speaking like they had all the answers? The figure took another step forward, closing the distance between them. The officer tensed, her hand hovering near her baton. Every muscle in her body screamed for action, but she held back. She needed information. She needed to understand what she was up against. "You think you can stop this?" the figure asked, their voice dripping with disdain. "This is bigger than your little station, your little planet. You have no idea what you're dealing with." They paused, their eyes narrowing as if measuring the officer. "But you will, soon enough." Before the officer could respond, a soft mechanical whirring sound filled the room. She turned, her gaze shifting toward the back wall, where a hidden hatch began to open slowly. Something was moving behind it, something large. The officer felt her stomach tighten, a sense of dread washing over her. The figure glanced over his shoulder, their expression unreadable, and then back to her. "I see you're about to learn the hard way." There was a finality in their tone, something that sent a chill through her spine. Suddenly, the officer's instincts kicked in. Without warning, she launched herself toward the figure, her baton raised. She wasn't going to wait for the unknown to get the better of her. She had to act. The figure's eyes widened for a split second, as if caught off guard by her sudden movement. But then their hands shot up, blocking her strike with surprising speed and strength. The officer stumbled back, her breath quickening as she regained her balance. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled the room as the figure raised their other hand, revealing a small device, which began to glow faintly with blue energy. "You really think you can fight me?" the figure taunted. "You don't know what you're dealing with. This is far beyond your station's reach." The officer didn't falter. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, she knew she couldn't back down now. She couldn't let whatever was happening unfold any further. "Then tell me. Explain it. I want answers." The figure's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You'll have your answers soon enough." They stepped closer, their eyes narrowing as if deciding something important. "But you won't like them." The officer's grip on her baton tightened, but she didn't move. She had to think. She couldn't let herself be drawn into a trap, no matter how much her body screamed to fight. There was too much at stake now, and she couldn't afford to make the wrong move. She needed a plan. Then, just as quickly as the figure had appeared, there was a blinding flash of light. The officer shielded her eyes instinctively, her mind racing. What was that? The world around her seemed to slow down, the hum of the energy device growing louder in her ears. For a split second, she felt a strange shift in the air, as if something ancient and powerful was stirring. When the light finally faded, the officer blinked rapidly, trying to regain her bearings. The figure was gone. In their place was only the soft, faint glow of the energy device, now lying abandoned on the ground. The officer's heart pounded in her chest, confusion and anger flooding her mind. She stood alone in the room now, the creature still watching her from the crate, its large eyes reflecting the dim light. What had just happened? Had she imagined it? Had the figure been a threat, or was there more to this mystery than she realized? She stood still, breathing heavily, trying to steady her thoughts. Whatever had just transpired, it was only the beginning. The officer knew deep down that she had only scratched the surface. Something far greater, far more dangerous, was lurking just beneath the surface, and she had just been pulled into it, and she was going to find out exactly what it was. The officer stood frozen in the middle of the dimly lit room, the hum of the abandoned energy device still buzzing faintly in her ears. Her hands still gripped her baton, but the urgency in her chest had faded into confusion and suspicion. The figure that had once loomed so ominously in the shadows was now gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of metal and ozone. The creature in the crate stared back at her, its large, intelligent eyes still wide, with that same pleading look it had worn earlier. But there was something different now. The air felt charged, as if the room had become a breeding ground for something far more dangerous than she had initially realized. The officer's mind raced. Had she just encountered a threat so elusive that even the surveillance systems couldn't pick it up? Was this some sort of elaborate distraction? Without warning, the creature let out a soft, gurgling sound and noise that seemed almost unnatural. The officer blinked, her focus snapping back to the small, glowing creature. Its fur shifted slightly, and its eyes narrowed. Something was happening to it, something far beyond what she had expected. The officer's heart skipped a beat. What was this creature? Why had it been hidden? She had only scratched the surface of something far more complex. She moved toward it cautiously, lowering her baton. She had no answers, no clear path forward. But she knew one thing for certain. This creature was connected to whatever it was the mysterious figure had been hiding. She reached out a hand, hesitating for just a moment before gently brushing the creature's fur. It was warm to the touch, like the surface of a living being. But there was something undeniably strange about it, a pulsing energy that seemed to vibrate beneath its skin. It wasn't just an animal. This was something else entirely. The officer's fingers froze mid-motion as a new realization dawned on her. The creature wasn't just hiding from her, it was communicating with her. But how? Her mind raced, running through every possibility, every piece of training that had prepared her for the bizarre and the unknown. But nothing about this made sense. Nothing about this was normal. The officer stepped back, wiping the sweat from her brow. She couldn't risk letting her guard down. Something deeper was at play, and it was beyond her understanding. She turned on her heel, eyes scanning the room for any hint of where to go next, when a sudden beeping noise echoed through the room. Her heart leaped into her throat. Her communicator had come to life, signaling an incoming transmission. She reached for the device clipped to her belt, activating it with a steadying breath. A cold voice, smooth and devoid of emotion, filled her earpiece. "Officer, we've detected an anomaly. Surveillance in Sector 9 has gone down. We need you to check it out immediately." The officer's stomach twisted with unease. Sector 9 was deep within the spaceport, far from the storage room where she was now. But something about the urgency in the voice told her this wasn't a simple technical failure. She had a sinking feeling that whatever was unfolding, it was all connected, understood. She replied, her voice steady despite the rapid heartbeat in her chest. She glanced once more at the creature, who was now curling its small body tighter, as if sensing her departure. "Stay here," she murmured, though she knew it could never understand. Her boots echoed through the darkened halls of the spaceport as she made her way toward the troubled sector. The walk felt endless, each step heavy with the weight of what she had discovered and the weight of what she still didn't know. What had that figure meant when they said the creature was more valuable than she could imagine? Why had they fled so quickly? And why had the surveillance system gone down right after her encounter with the mysterious figure? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden hiss of a nearby door sliding open. The officer froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her baton. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she peered into the dimly lit hallway ahead. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the hum of distant machinery and the occasional footstep. She wasn't alone. The officer stepped forward cautiously, her eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. She had been trained for moments like this, moments of tension, where every corner could hide an enemy, and she was certain now that something was waiting for her. In Sector 9, she rounded a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. Before her stood a strange, makeshift barricade, metal crates stacked haphazardly, blocking the path forward. But what was more unsettling than the barricade itself was the faint, glowing light coming from the gap between the crates. The officer's eyes narrowed as she approached slowly, taking careful steps, every instinct screaming at her to be prepared for whatever lay beyond. As she neared the edge, she paused, listening for any sign of movement. The light grew brighter, but there was no sound, no sign of life. Something about this didn't feel right. Without thinking, the officer crouched down and peered through the narrow gap. What she saw made her blood run cold. There, hidden in the shadows, was a large, metallic door sealed shut, but with strange, intricate markings glowing across its surface. This wasn't any ordinary door. It was something alien, something ancient, and something that had clearly been hidden for a reason. Her hand shook as she reached for the control panel next to the door, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. She hesitated for only a moment before pressing the button, expecting to hear the familiar whir of automated systems unlocking. Instead, there was nothing, just an eerie silence. Then, without warning, the door began to tremble. The strange markings on its surface began to pulse, brighter and brighter, as if reacting to her presence. The officer stepped back, eyes widening in shock. What was this? Why had this door been hidden here, in the middle of a spaceport? What could possibly be behind it? As the door slowly opened with a soft hiss, the officer's breath caught in her throat. Beyond the threshold lay a vast, empty room, more of a chamber than anything else. But what stood in the center of the room stopped her heart. The creature was there, and it was no longer the small, helpless animal she had seen earlier. Now, it was something much more, its body glowing with an otherworldly energy, its eyes piercing through the darkness. And standing beside it, with his back turned to her, was the hooded figure, the one who had disappeared so quickly earlier. The officer felt a wave of dread wash over her. Whatever had just unfolded, whatever this creature truly was, it was part of something far bigger than anything she had ever faced. She was no longer in control of this investigation. This was something much darker, something she had only begun to understand. And now, it was too late to turn back. The officer stood at the threshold of the chamber, the weight of her actions pressing heavily on her shoulders. The door, which had opened so ominously, now seemed to trap her in this dark, unfamiliar place. Her breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight before her. The creature, still glowing with strange, pulsating energy, had grown in size, its form almost majestic now, radiating an eerie power. Its wide, intelligent eyes watched her closely, unblinking. There was something undeniably ancient about it, something that made her blood run cold. The figure, still hooded, still enigmatic, was standing in front of the creature, their back to her. They seemed lost in thought, their hands resting lightly at their sides, as if waiting for something, or perhaps someone. The officer didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to act. She had followed the trail, discovered a mysterious, hidden corner of the spaceport, and now she was face to face with the source of it all. She couldn't let the figure slip away again. "Stop," she called out, her voice a mixture of command and desperation. Her hand hovered near her baton, ready for action. The figure, however, didn't flinch. They didn't even turn around. The officer's heart began to race. They were taunting her. This wasn't a game, and yet, here she was playing by their rules. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her boots making a soft thud against the cold floor. The figure finally moved, but only slightly. They shifted their weight, raising their head ever so slightly, as if acknowledging her presence, but still keeping their back to her. "Do you think you found the answers?" The voice that came from the figure was quiet, almost too calm for the situation. It was the same voice she had heard earlier, but now there was an underlying malice to it. A subtle edge that sent a chill down her spine. "You think you understand what's happening here? You have no idea." The officer's hand tightened around her baton. "I know enough to see that you've been hiding something. That creature, it's not just a pet. It's something far more dangerous, isn't it?" The figure chuckled softly, but the sound was cold, devoid of humor. "Dangerous? You still don't understand. That creature, as you call it, is not what you think. It is the key to something much larger than you could ever imagine. It's the last piece of a puzzle that has been centuries in the making." The officer's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information she had gathered. She had been right all along. This was bigger than she had first realized. Whatever was going on, it involved more than just smuggling or illegal activity. The creature, the hidden doors, the tampered surveillance systems, it was all connected. But to what and why? "Tell me what's going on," she demanded, her voice steady, but filled with the urgency of the moment. Why was it hidden? Who are you working for? The figure finally turned around, their face still obscured by the hood, but their presence was no less imposing. The air seemed to thrum with energy, as if the very room was holding its breath. They looked at her for a long moment, their eyes unreadable beneath the shadows. "You still don't get it, do you?" they said, their voice lowering, almost as if speaking to themselves. "It's not about who I work for. It's about what we are becoming." The officer frowned, trying to make sense of their words. "We? Who's we?" The figure stepped closer to the creature, their fingers brushing the glowing surface of its body. The officer felt an electric charge ripple through the air, as though something monumental was about to happen. The creature responded, its body glowing brighter, and for a moment, it almost seemed to breathe in unison with the figure. "The creature is part of a larger plan," the figure continued, their voice gaining strength. "A plan to transform, to evolve into something greater. It is not just a pet. It is a living key to unlocking a new stage of existence, one that transcends what you or I could ever be. It's the next step for us all." The officer's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the figure's words hit her. "You're telling me this thing, it's part of some kind of evolution, a transformation?" The figure nodded, their face still hidden, but their eyes gleaming with an unspoken truth. "Not just any evolution, a forced one. We've waited for millennia to harness this power. The creature, it's the last of its kind, and it carries the secret to our future. We've been searching for it for years, and now that we've found it, we can control everything." The officer felt a sense of dread rise in her chest. She had stumbled into something she couldn't possibly comprehend. Whatever this figure was planning, whatever the creature was capable of, it was more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. She had thought she was merely investigating a simple case of smuggling. But this was no ordinary crime. This was something far darker, something that could change everything. "You're insane," the officer whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. "You can't just control people like that. You can't force evolution. You don't know what you're playing with." The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, they turned toward the creature again, their hand hovering over its glowing body, as though communing with it. The officer's heart raced as she watched the scene unfold, her mind struggling to catch up with the enormity of the situation. "What's your plan?" she asked, her voice growing louder, more insistent. "What do you want with me?" The figure turned their head, their eyes finally meeting hers, and in that moment, she saw a glimmer of something unsettlingly familiar. A part of her wanted to believe it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, she knew the truth. She wasn't just dealing with a smuggler or a rogue officer. She was facing something much darker, something she couldn't fully comprehend. "Your role," the figure said slowly, "isn't over yet. You're part of this now, whether you want to be or not." The officer's blood ran cold. The pieces were finally falling into place, but the final picture was one she didn't want to see. She had just become part of something far larger than herself, a plot that would change the very fabric of the universe, and she had no idea how far the ripples would reach. The chamber was suffocatingly silent, save for the faint hum of the energy device still pulsing with an eerie light. The officer stood frozen, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest, making each breath feel heavier than the last. The figure's cryptic words echoed in her mind. "You're part of this now, whether you wanted to be or not." The dread she had felt when the figure had first spoken had now shifted into something deeper, more unsettling. She wasn't just an investigator anymore. She had been drawn into something far darker than she could have ever imagined, and there was no easy way out. Her eyes shifted to the creature. The glow from its body now bathed the entire room in an unnatural light, casting long, distorted shadows against the cold walls. It seemed to pulse in rhythm with her racing heart, each beat making the room feel more claustrophobic, more out of control. This was no longer a simple mission. This was a descent into a nightmare. She had uncovered something, but now the full scope of it was becoming terrifyingly clear. Whatever this creature was, whatever the figure was trying to do, it was about to change everything. The officer's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of movement, footsteps. Her hand instinctively went to her sidearm, but the figure had already begun to move. Their steps slow, deliberate, The figure seemed unfazed, almost peaceful in their approach, as though they had all the time in the universe. They didn't fear her, not in the slightest. "You still don't understand," the figure said, their voice smooth and calm, as though they were explaining a simple fact. "You think you're here to stop something, to stop me, but you're wrong. What you don't realize is that you've already set things in motion. You've already made your choice." The officer's pulse quickened, confusion and anger mixing. "Together, I haven't made any choice. I'm not part of your twisted plan." The figure's smile was thin, almost pitying. "You have. You are part of it. You just don't know it yet. You've been watching, investigating, prying into something you don't understand. And now you're at the center of it, whether you like it or not." With every word, the officer's confusion deepened. What did they mean by that? How could she have been part of their plan when she had been trying to stop them all along? Her grip tightened on her baton, her entire body tensed, preparing for any sign of movement that would require her to act. But even as she stood ready, she knew something was wrong. The situation was slipping out of her control, and she had no idea what was coming next. The figure took another step forward, their attention now fully on her, but their gaze flicked briefly to the creature, as if checking to see if it was still there, still responding. The officer's eyes followed the movement. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the glowing creature that now seemed to be radiating a strange, powerful energy. The creature, the figure continued, their voice softer now, "isn't just a physical being. It's a conduit, a bridge. And you," they pointed directly at the officer, "are standing in the middle of it. You're connected, whether you understand it or not. The creature chose you the moment you touched it. You've made a bond with it, and with that bond comes a responsibility." The officer's breath hitched. A bond? She hadn't meant to do anything like that. She had only tried to understand, to investigate. But as her hand had brushed against the creature's glowing fur, she had felt something she couldn't explain, a ripple like a subtle, unseen thread linking her to the creature. Was that what they meant? Was this some kind of psychic connection? And if so, what did it mean for her? "What are you saying?" she demanded, trying to force her voice to remain steady, but it trembled despite herself. "What does this creature want from me?" The figure's eyes gleamed with something dark, something that sent a chill through her. "It doesn't want anything. It is simply the means to an end. And as for you," they chuckled, the sound rich with dark amusement, "you're not just the observer anymore. You've become a part of the path." The officer's mind reeled. Path? What path? She wasn't sure she wanted to know anymore, but she couldn't back down. She couldn't let fear take over. She had to fight for control, to figure out what was really happening here. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "What happens now?" Her voice was steadier than she felt. The figure stood motionless for a moment, eyes flickering to the creature, and then back to her. "Now," they gave a soft laugh, shaking their heads slightly. "Now, you learn. You'll be the first to witness what comes next, the transformation." The officer's stomach tightened, and instinctively, she took a step back. "Transformation? What are you talking about?" The figure tilted their head, considering her for a long moment before responding. "The creature you see before you isn't just a pet. It's part of something much larger. The creatures like it were scattered, hidden away, to protect the future. But there's only one left now, the last of its kind. You're connected to it. You'll understand soon enough. But first, you'll feel it. The bond will become stronger." She could feel a strange sensation starting to pulse through her, an odd warmth building. In the center of her chest, it wasn't painful, but it was undeniable. The officer's heart raced as the air around her seemed to crackle with energy. She had no idea what was happening, but she could sense that the creature wasn't just watching her anymore. It was aware of her. Its glowing eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the creature was speaking to her in some way, its energy intertwining with hers. "No," she whispered, taking another step back, her mind spinning. "I don't want this. I don't want to be part of your experiment." The figure stepped forward, their expression unreadable. "It's too late for that. You are part of this now. Whether you accept it or not, the process has already begun. You've crossed a line, officer, and there's no going back. Fear, uncertainty, and the dawning realization of what she had gotten herself into surged through her. The officer stumbled, her mind grasping at the remnants of her agency, of the control she thought she had. She had been drawn into a web much bigger than herself, and now there was no escape. She wasn't just investigating a smuggling operation. She was in the heart of something far more dangerous, and she didn't know how to stop it. As the creature's glow intensified, she understood one thing with terrifying clarity: whatever happened next, she was no longer just a spectator. She had become an unwilling participant in a game much larger than she could have ever imagined, and there was no way to tell who would emerge victorious. The officer's pulse raced as she stood at the edge of the chamber, her hands still shaking slightly from the strange connection she felt with the creature. Every fiber of her being screamed for action, for a way to break free from whatever dark force was wrapping itself around her. The glowing creature before her was no longer just a mysterious figure. It was something alive, something that had woven itself into the very core of her being. And the figure, the one who had manipulated her every step, stood silently watching, waiting for her to understand the magnitude of her situation. She couldn't breathe properly. Her thoughts were clouded, fogged by a sense of dread and a terrifying sense of inevitability. It was as if the walls of the chamber were closing in on her, the space feeling smaller with every passing second. She had made a choice without even realizing it. The figure had said it was too late to go back, but she wasn't ready to give up yet. She wasn't ready to surrender to this twisted fate. The figure's voice broke through the haze of her thoughts, smooth and calm, as though they were explaining something simple. You can feel it, can't you? The bond, it's not just mental, it's physical, emotional. You're tied to the creature in a way you can't undo. You've become part of something far greater than yourself. You're not just an observer anymore. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but her limbs felt heavy, almost as if they weren't her own. Every time she tried to move, her connection with the creature seemed to pull her back, holding her in place. It was like an invisible thread tugging at her very soul. The officer looked at the creature once more, its glowing body now pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Its eyes were locked onto hers, and in that moment, it almost felt as though it could understand her fear. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't chosen to become part of whatever this was, and yet, here she stood, on the verge of something she couldn't control. "Why me?" she whispered, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. "Why did you choose me?" The figure tilted their head, considering her question with a strange sense of amusement. It wasn't a matter of choice, it was destiny. "Officer, you were always meant to be here." The creature sensed you, just as you sensed it. You're part of a much bigger plan, a plan that started long before either of us even existed. The officer's stomach churned. This wasn't just a criminal case. This wasn't even just a fight for survival. This was something ancient, something far older than the galaxy itself, and she had stumbled right into the heart of it. There was no escape now, not unless she could find the strength to break free from the creature's hold and the figure's influence. "You think this is destiny?" she spat, her voice trembling with anger. "You think I'm just some pawn in your game? I don't believe you. I'm not some part of your plan. I'm not your weapon." The figure's eyes darkened, and for a moment, they didn't say anything. The silence between them stretched out, tense and oppressive. And then, almost too calmly, they spoke again. "You are so much more than a pawn, officer. You're a catalyst. This creature isn't just a tool for power. It is the key to a new world, and you," they pointed at her, their finger like a dagger in the air. "You'll unlock that world." Her breath caught in her throat as their words sank in. Unlock a new world. What was this creature? What kind of power was the figure talking about? She had assumed it was just another alien smuggling operation, another rogue faction trying to gain control. But now she saw the terrible truth. This was something far more dangerous. It was about more than just control, it was about domination. The figure stepped closer, their presence looming over her. "You can fight it all you want, but you know the truth deep down. This is your purpose now. The bond you share with the creature is not just some accident. It is the bridge between the past and the future, between what was and what will be." The officer felt a shiver crawl up her spine, but she pushed it down, trying to steady her breath. She wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. She couldn't. "I won't be your pawn," she said through gritted teeth. "I won't be a part of whatever sick, twisted plan you've cooked up." The figure didn't react at first, but the creature seemed to respond to her words. It shifted its body slightly, its glowing form pulsing brighter, as if attuned to the officer's. Defiance. The figure glanced at the creature, their expression unreadable, and then back to her. "You think you have a choice. You think you can defy what's been set in motion. The creature is already linked to you. Its power is in you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." The officer shook her head fiercely, trying to ignore the growing pull she felt in her chest. She had to break free. She had to stop this. She wasn't going to let them control her, no matter how powerful the creature was, no matter how inescapable the connection felt. "I won't be a part of this," she repeated, louder this time, her voice steady with resolve. "I'll fight until my last breath if I have to." A slow, almost sorrowful smile spread across the figure's face. "Very well. If you're determined to fight it, so be it. But know this, you've already made your choice. The creature chose you, and you chose it, whether you understand that or not. The future is already unfolding." Before she could respond, the creature let out a strange, almost melodic sound, a sound that seemed to vibrate within her very bones. The energy around them both surged, growing more intense with each passing second. The officer's heart hammered in her chest as the glowing light around the creature grew blindingly bright. And in that moment, as the energy crackled in the air, the officer knew one thing with horrifying clarity. The figure was right. There was no escaping this. There was no going back. She had already crossed the threshold. She was no longer just an observer. She was a part of something far larger, far darker than she could ever have imagined. And there was no telling where it would take her.